Is the defense ready to call its next witness?
Yes, Your Honor. We call Charlie Adelson.
Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth?
I do, sir.
You may take your seat.
Charlie, let's start with the most important question. Did you cause the death of Professor Dan Markell?
Absolutely no.
You are listening to the Roberta Glass True Crime Report, putting the true back in true crime. From New York City, Roberta Glass is now on the record. Okay, how is everyone? Wanted to talk to you today about Dan Rashbaum and the hot water he seems to have got himself into, giving the STS interview, taking on Donna as a client, and of course, Donna's hot mic moment on the jailhouse call, where she says Dan has told me what they're thinking about up there, up north in Tallahassee, and we may not make it out, meaning we may not make it out to Vietnam via Dubai. And she makes it very clear that she's going to Vietnam on a one-way ticket. She doesn't say one-way ticket, but we know now it was a one-way ticket because it's a non-extradition country. She even wants to talk to her daughter, Wendy, a lawyer who doesn't talk. But before I get into that, got some comments from you guys. Robin McBroom 8956 says, it's incredible. She is keeping Rashbaum, waving away her rights. This is me talking, not Robin McBroom 8956, waving away her rights at a hearing this week, saying if he gets called to the stand and he can no longer be my lawyer, I'll roll the dice. And he seems to be saying the same kind of thing in his interview, but we'll get into that. She could get a brilliant attorney who could most likely come up with a fresh, albeit nutty defense. Instead, it's what you did for Charlie was brilliant, right? Right. This is the lawyer who is so brilliant. The jury came back in less than 3 hours with a guilty verdict. BC Blues 31 says, what Dan did was brilliant. I agree for the prosecution. His brilliance is life in prison without parole. So I'm happy Donna is sticking with this guy. So is he. Money, 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 money. Yeah, that looks like it. That looks like some of his motivation. Some of his other motivation, I think, is fame. That's all that interview did for him, except call attention to the fact that he helped his client try to flee the country and flee arrest. Flower J. Potter, 1629, says, one of the things I noticed about Charlie is the way he holds his head. My ex-husband held his head in the same way, with his chin up in the air. and he was a constant, daily liar. He thought he was invincible too. Very interesting, Flower J. Potter. And Susan, a Patreon supporter, sent me this. Hi, Roberta. Every time I start to feel sorry for Donna and her 80-year-old helpless husband, I visualize innocent, hardworking, and immensely talented Dan's head blown in by the hitman's gun in his home garage and quickly wish the same justice to happen to them. The airport arrest footage and your commentary is very funny and entertaining. Thank you, Susan. Also, I appreciate your Ponzi scheme backstory to the Adelsons. Yeah, go back to that episode if you didn't hear it. They lost a lot of money in a Ponzi scheme in Miami in the early 1990s. It hit home with me as I once worked in program management in the same industry. It's run by the mafia, by the way. I guess I feel lucky that I lived to tell the tale someday, Susan. Yeah, I bet you do have an interesting story there, Susan. Thanks so much for sharing that with me. And the whole Ponzi scheme aspect of this story is interesting to me. Makes me wonder if that's where this kind of need not to be a sucker and to make other people suckers from the Adelsons started. So let's go back and refresh now just with a little clip. It's not a long clip, but it is Rashbaum, so trigger alert warning to everybody. This is his interview on STS. And here he is answering for his part in Donna's fleeing. What was his part? Did he advise her, et cetera, et cetera? So not only was she caught on the jailhouse tapes when she got arrested in the airport, she wouldn't hand over her phone, and there's a tug of war between Donna and the arresting officer with her phone, and she's saying, my lawyer told me not to hand over my phone. So what it looks like is that Dan was very involved with advising Donna about when, how she should flee and what to do if she should get arrested, right? Remember back? Dan says we might not make it out. So I always wondered if she thought that she was on a no-fly list, or was she prepared mentally for getting arrested? But it looked like to me that they thought they would both be arrested. You can see in that footage, Harvey's looking over at Donna and a feeling of relief comes over him just for a millisecond. That's what I saw when he realizes it's only his wife. It's really such a might makes right. Every man out for themselves kind of family, ultimately. So here is, without further ado, here is Dan Rashbaum defending his ethics and his behavior.
Let me set this up. So this is a wiretap between Donna and Charlie, which I should have set up earlier. And she's talking to Charlie. This is now after the conviction. I'm sorry, this is a jailhouse call after the conviction. And Donna invokes a name, and it is Dan. Let's listen one more time, then I'll ask Dan some questions. They're actually from Patreon member Bobby.
So after speaking to Dan this morning and knowing what they're thinking up there, and I don't know if we'll make it out in time. I really don't. Because Dan said, you might, or you might do all of it, get to the airport, and they'll stop us. And that could happen. It could happen. I don't know, but it's worth a try.
Dan, I got to say, this doesn't look too good either, what they call a bad fact. From Patreon member Bobby, is it you that she is referring to? And did you have prior knowledge of her flight?
So I'm going to read what I've written here so I don't screw this up. Because I anticipated this question would come. I can't talk about what I said or didn't say because it's privileged. What I can say is that at the time Donna Adelson went to the airport, she was a free woman. What I can say is there was no indictment to anyone's knowledge. We know now there wasn't one. There was no grand jury that we knew was convened. We know now it wasn't convened till after. And there was no arrest warrant that was known of. In fact, we know the arrest warrant, I think, was just obtained hours before the flight. Again, she had offered to surrender at any point in time from 2016 on. I know that because I had made that offer. She did nothing wrong by going to the airport. Okay. Now, I cannot tell you what I advised her, what I knew, or what I didn't know. But what I can tell you for certain is that I acted within my ethical obligations. And what I can tell you for certain is that no crimes were committed by her going to the airport. And that's why she wasn't charged with any sort of crimes related to that. That's what I can tell you at this point in time.
And Dan, you're going to see some of the comments, and I'm bringing them up here because look, Jody Arrington, nice lawyer talk. And then we've got this, not good that he had to write a prepared statement to respond. And, you know.
So let me answer that. Let me answer that.
Please do.
So I'm at there's very little I can say here because I have obligations to my client, right? And I have obligations to the system. So I wrote a prepared statement so that I could meet those obligations and didn't mess up and by accident give away something that I shouldn't say because I'm a human being. And so I'm following the instructions of an ethics lawyer that I consulted with in order to make sure that I'm following my ethical obligations. Now, having said that, this is another example. Now it's on me, a lawyer, where there's really nothing I can say to appease your audience, right? I can't say what I advised or what she advised because it's privileged.
I mean, can you tell us, did you say, Donna, get out of here, run to Vietnam?
I cannot say what I said and what I didn't say because it's privileged.
Can you tell us if she had a plan for once she got to Vietnam? What was she going to do? Sit there and backpack? Like, did she have any?
I cannot say what I said or what my client said to me because it's privileged. What I can tell you, and it's the most I can tell you, is that there was nothing wrong with her traveling. And the state had the absolute right to do what they did, which is when they learned of her travel, speed up their plans to arrest her. That's the best that I can tell you at this point in time. I'm sure you'll hear more about it at trial.
Okay, so you heard it here first. Daniel Rashbaum, breaking news. Daniel Rashbaum is a human being. Breaking news. You'll hear it only on this channel and SDS that Daniel Rashbaum is, in fact, a human being and not a soulless ghoul defending murderer after murderer. Going out on a PR campaign, lying for them, helping them flee the long arm of justice. He is, in fact, a human being. So I think it was very bad that for him that all this came out. I didn't think he expected it to come out. I think neither Donna nor Dan expected that Donna would be talking on a recorded line, even if she If we didn't have those calls, we couldn't prove that she was going to Vietnam because it was a non-extradition country. We couldn't prove that Dan had anything to do, knew anything about it, advised her. It's a serious ethical problem for a lawyer, but they never seem to really get into any trouble unless you have a whole bunch of devoted watchers on a case. Now, I wouldn't be surprised if people in this audience have not already reported him to the bar, to the Florida bar for unethical conduct. So he is really in hot water with this. There's a lawyer, a YouTube lawyer, also weighed into it, and we're going to get into that. But first, I'm going to take a little break. Don't get upset. It's only 35 seconds, 35 seconds break. And I'll meet you on the other side of the break. Don't go anywhere. If you are enjoying this episode of my True Crime Report, please hit the thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and share this episode. Get access to exclusive podcasts and other bonus content by becoming a patron today. If you have a question or comment for me, shoot me a super chat and I'll do my best to answer it and read it on air. Thanks so much. Now back to the show. Okay, that wasn't bad. I always have people who are like, why is she taking a break? What is she doing? Sometimes I need a palate cleanse, guys. Sometimes I need a palate cleanse. So, very interesting. There's a lawyer, convos with counsel. And he thought not only was this bad for Dan Rashbaum with the ethical issues, it's very bad for Donna to have a lawyer who could be brought up to the stand and have to recuse himself as her lawyer in the middle of the trial or the beginning of the trial or preparing for the trial. So it's hard to know what would happen. I guess he would have to wait till the moment he's brought up, right? And then he would recuse himself. Because I would think I would need to talk to a lawyer about this, but I would think that even if he were on the witness list, that they would proceed forward because often you don't get called, even if you are on a witness list. But let's listen to what Convos with Counsel had to say. He played, of course, in the middle between the intro and his comments, he played the hearing. So I edited that out. So here's his remarks on the issue.
I understand.
This will look awful for Donna and her chances if her lawyer has to take the stand to defend himself in her decision to try to flee the country. People, including jurors, already have the preconceived notion that defense attorneys are scum of the earth individuals who would defend any and everyone for $1. Rashbaum on the stand trying to explain his actions will strip him of any credibility he has remaining. Remember, he's the one who articulated that idiotic double-layered extortion defense in the Charlie Adelson trial, and I think that will be Donna's defense as well, based off of the interview he did last week. Raising that defense in combination with this incident, telling Donna to try to flee, will essentially solidify the jurors that the notion they had beforehand is in fact accurate. Donna is in a world of trouble. Situation very interesting and borderline against several rules that govern lawyers. Remember, as attorneys, we must abide by the rules of professional conduct. And if one doesn't, then their license can get suspended or they can even be disbarred. So the first issue is the waivable conflict situation that has taken place since Dan Rashbaum represented Charlie Adelson and is now representing a co-defendant of his, Donna Adelson. He calls it a waivable conflict since he no longer represents Charlie and is now only representing Donna. He also stated in an interview that he used to represent Donna and Harvey, but when he started representing Charlie, his representation for Donna and Harvey ceased. And now that he's representing only Donna, His representation for Charlie and even Harvey ceased. This is a slippery slope that I try to avoid at all costs, but he received some advice from a conflicts attorney who assured him that he was in the clear. And the second issue that comes up here is Rule 3.7, and it addresses lawyers as witnesses. A lawyer shall not act as advocate at trial in which the lawyer will likely be a necessary witness. And the court brings this up because Rashbaum could be called as a witness by Georgia Kappelman for sure in this case due to his involvement in the attempt to flee the country by Donna Adelson. Remember, she stated in one of those jail calls to Dan that, quote, Dan told her that she might be able to get out of the country or that she might get stopped. Who knows? If he told her that over the phone, who knows what he probably sent to her via email or text, and the state will subpoena her phone records and have access to all of those conversations. If that's the case, then Dan will be an important witness for the state to call to show and prove that Donna wanted to get the hell out of Dodge and was planning to escape the minute Charlie was found guilty by that jury. So yes, the rule states that a lawyer shall not act as advocate at trial in which the lawyer is likely to be a necessary witness unless, remember, there's always exceptions to the rule, unless, number one, the testimony relates to an uncontested issue. And this issue of Donna trying to flee the country will be contested unless Dan says that she was just leaving to go on vacation or something of that sort. Then there's a stipulation there that she was and did try to take a one-way flight to Vietnam. That's the route I think he will go based off of the interview he did last week. But I think that the state will frame their communications in a way where the lawyer is giving advice to his client on whether they should attempt to flee to Vietnam or wherever. If that's the case, then that will be a contested issue for sure, and Dan won't be able to represent Donna at trial. But the way Dan was framing it in that interview I keep speaking of he did last week, he stated that there was no warrant out for her arrest. She was a free woman, and he gave her advice, or he told her, yeah, you should go on vacation, or you can go on vacation to Vietnam, or whatever the case may be. So if that's the case, I think he's going to stick to the fact that, hey, yeah, she tried to leave the country to go on vacation, but she intended to come back. The second exception to the rule is if the testimony relates to the nature and value of legal services rendered in the case. Or number three, disqualification of the lawyer will work substantial hardship on the client. So those are the three exceptions to the rule. This will look awful for Donna and her chances if her lawyer has to take the stand to defend himself in her decision to try to flee the country. People, including jurors, already have the preconceived notion that defense attorneys are scum of the earth individuals who would defend any and everyone for $1. Rashbaum on the stand trying to explain his actions will strip him of any credibility he has remaining. Remember, he's the one who articulated that idiotic double-layered extortion defense in the Charlie Adelson trial, and I think that will be Donna's defense as well, based off of the interview he did last week. Raising that defense in combination with this incident, telling Donna to try to flee, will essentially solidify the jurors that the notion they had beforehand is in fact accurate. Donna is in a world of trouble. Well, that's it for me today. I appreciate you guys, and if you appreciate content of this magnitude, please feel free to like, share, and subscribe. So until next time, I'll see you and stay safe.
Okay, you heard it. His idiotic, did you guys hear that? His idiotic defense. And great comment. Banana bread, banana bread. As Donna, of course, that's a reference to Donna's banana bread that she made, according to Wendy, this imaginary banana bread that she made Dan, and Dan gave her a hug. Rashi knew the grand jury was sitting just before Donna tried to escape and yet denied knowing anything about the grand jury on the Wednesday. We all did, but he didn't. It's ludicrous. So lawyers are picking up on it, and they're like, ethically, we know that Dan said he talked to an ethics lawyer, et cetera, and he made sure that he was doing everything ethically. And if you have to ask, maybe you shouldn't be doing it. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, I'm sure some of that was around the fleeing. And yes, she was a free woman, but you knew she was about to not become a free woman. The whole idea of fleeing is to get out while you still are a free woman. Do you get what I'm saying? So be curious to see if there's any movement with him. Usually not. Usually these lawyers get away with a lot of sus stuff, but this is a very watched case. Another case, no problem. Help somebody, advise them on fleeing, and yet it's a really bad idea to represent Donna. I know she feels comfortable. I know it comforts her in her paranoid state that she's in the circle of trust. So it's like a very Cote-like family. They all think alike. Charlie's innocent. We did nothing wrong. Tallahassee is terrible. The jury is terrible. We can't get a fair trial in Tallahassee. Georgia Kappelman is only out for her own reasons, for her own ambition. That's the refrain of the Adelson family. And I'm sure Rashbaum, to be in the circle of trust, he has to repeat all of that, nod his head, say, oh, yes, it's terrible. The jury was terrible. We didn't have a fair shot. I mean, I've never seen a trial like that. Law and Crime has some of the biggest fans of the defense in their audience. And whether you're watching the Durst trial or the Adelson trial, you're always going to see like a few people very cheering it on. He's going to be acquitted. The state is terrible. But usually there's quite a presence. Here, not so much. Pretty much everyone, if you followed the chat, was like, this guy's guilty. End of story. Caught on tape. Let's wrap this thing up. And that was the jury's response. It was so quick. So quick. So Donna's doing the same thing. I mean, isn't that the definition of insanity? Doing the same thing over again, hiring the same lawyer and expecting different results. But I don't think it's so much of a matter of the lawyer here. Sure, she could get a better lawyer than Dan Rashbaum. I think he's just an average lawyer. To me, he gets about a C as a criminal defense lawyer, maybe a B-. But he's also ethically in that area that this family likes. This very comfortable, little bit outside the law area. That's my opinion. It's not a fact. That's just my opinion of Dan Rashbaum. That I think he's ethically unsound, morally vacant, vapid. And she must like that. So it's going to be interesting to see how this all plays out. And I wouldn't be surprised if Dan Rashbaum exits the stage in the beginning of the trial and Morris has to take over. And Dan Rashbaum can't be that great closer we all know he is, LOL. But I'm going to keep it just brief today. That's really what I have to say. I don't think there's any point in stretching it out unless anyone has questions. I'm going to end as I do on most days with a victim impact letter. And this was sent in the state of Florida versus Sigfredo Garcia and Catherine McManaway, meaning this is Catherine McManaway's first trial. where she got a hung jury. Dear Judge Hankins, oh, excuse me, I'm losing my voice a little bit. Dear Judge Hankinson, I am writing to offer a victim impact statement on behalf of Dan Markel in relation to the above noted cases. To me, Dan was a fellow legal scholar who over time became a treasured intellectual colleague and ultimately a dear friend. I know I am only one of many people whose relationship with Dan followed that same trajectory. Dan and I started our academic careers around the same time. I met him in 2005 at a conference for junior criminal law professors where he was presenting a draft article, one it turned out he would never publish. Though he worked on it from time to time over the next decade, worrying over and revising a draft until he was entirely satisfied, was typical Dan, though somehow it didn't impede his output. I have never met a scholar so exacting who was also so productive. The paper, the presentation, and most especially his interaction with questioners highlighted traits I would come to associate with Dan as a thinker, bold, thorough, dogged in defending his position, yet genuinely interested in hearing concerns and reactions that might help him refine or improve it. We grew closer as our careers progressed, and for several years we co-organized a regular colloquium of criminal law scholars held at rotating locations in New York City every month or two. I say co-organized in quotes because Dan did all the work. My role was mostly to give this NYC colloquium some actual formal connection to NYC since I taught at Brooklyn and Dan was officially in Florida, though he came up for every gathering. The email notification list for the colloquium, which Dan curated, grew to include people from all over the world because Dan had so many connections and didn't want to leave anyone out of the opportunity of being involved. And indeed, we attracted speakers from all over the country as well as Canada, Israel, and elsewhere. I just returned to New York City after 3 years elsewhere and am currently working with others to revive what will now be called the Markelquium. As it happens, we just scheduled our first pair of speakers this week. In what proved to be the last years of his life, in addition to work-related interactions, Dan and I saw each other regularly for coffee or drinks, sometimes with others, sometimes just us. We also spoke often by phone. Dan's back bothered him, and he would go for long walks and call me, and I'm certain many other friends to pass the time. He was funny. He was generous. He cared about what was happening in my life. He shared what was happening in his. He was, in short, all you would want in a friend. But unusually, in my experience at least, for a well-known peer, he was also sort of a role model. I viewed him not only with affection, but with admiration. He was a devoted and dedicated professor, and when he became a father, he was even more devoted and dedicated to his children. Yet somehow, without ever slowing down professionally. Most of all, I admired that even in the most difficult times, he was filled with joy and gratitude for his life and its blessings. In 2011, Dan was chosen by a brand new criminal law journal at the University of Virginia to be the counterpiece to its inaugural volume. An event was organized for him to give a lecture, and several others, I was one, to offer commentary, all of which would then be published as the debut issue of the journal. The journal's selection of a scholar so relatively young and junior as the very first person to honor in this way left me amazed and, I must say, jealous, but not surprised. This is what I said about Dan at the event before addressing the substance of his remarks. If you look at Dan's resume, you will see that he is one of the most prolific young scholars out there, not only about punishment theory, but about a number of other things as well. What you won't see is that Dan is also one of the most voracious, generous, and diligent readers of other people's work, and someone who offers such thorough and useful and helpful comments and suggestions to other people that not only through his own work, which is more than enough for him to hang his hat on, but also through the way he has crafted and improved other people's work, it is clear that Dan is one of the most significant and influential criminal theorists of his and my generation. One of the small comforts I have taken in the wake of Dan's death is my gratitude for having the opportunity to offer that praise to and about him in his presence while he was alive. But that comfort is utterly dwarfed by my remorse in knowing what I and an entire intellectual community have lost. And that loss endures. It is ongoing. In July, my law school hosted the annual 2-day Crime Fest conference, which brought together more than 100 scholars from around the country. A conference Dan started and for a time presided over as both sage and animating spirit. Every year I think Dan should still be here. However long I am given for my own professional life, I will never stop thinking about that. Dan Markel was brilliant and beloved. He was in every way full of life, but he was also denied his fill of life. He had much more to give over many years to his friends, to his colleagues, his community, and his family. That has all been taken away. Very truly yours, Michael T. Cahill. That's what I have for today, guys. Thanks for tuning in and listening. I'll be back tomorrow at 6 p.m. Eastern for another live stream, and I'll see you then. Please hit the thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, share this episode. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, please leave a 5-star review and have a great evening.